Hi there. This week I had to ask myself a very serious question. Should I retire? The answer was yes. But it's not in the way that you think. I'm going to talk in Esperanto for a minute, and then we're going to discuss what I just said so that you can understand it all. You might be confused by a few words that I use, but by the end, you are going to grow as an Esperanto speaker and listener, and you're going to be more fluent than you were before. So I'm excited as we grow together, and you're going to learn a little bit about what my week has looked like. Antaŭ kelkaj tagoj, mi rimarkis ion strangan alveninte al mia laborejo. Ion ne estis en ordo, kaj controllinte extere mi malkovris la problemon, io pikis, aŭ pli ĝuste tranĉis mian pneŭon, kaj kion mi faru? Nu, mi uzis mian krikon, kaj levis la radon, la tutan aŭton, kaj mi metis la benjeton sur ĝin. Nu, kio estas benjeto, ne vera manĝebla benjeto, sed eta ne plengrandan pneŭon aŭ radon. Kaj mi sukcese alvenis hejmen. Post kelkaj tagoj mi provis trovi bonan riparejon, sed ĉu mi maltrafu mian laboron por iri tie, kai lasi la aŭton? Mi ne volas fari tion, kion mi faru. Kai najbaro informis min, ke estas homo kiu venos al via hejmo por ripari vian aŭton. Do mi dungis tiun personon, kai li venis al mia strato, kai ĉi tie li instalis paron da pneŭmatikoj. Kai nur unu malnova pneŭo estis tranĉita, la alia ancora estas bona kaj preskaŭ nova, do mi konservis tion, sed estas bone aĉeti pneŭojn en paroj, do mi nun havas freŝan paron, sed la alia, la kroma aldona pneŭo, kion mi faru pri ĝi? Nu, mi iros, venontsemajne, mi iros al aŭtovrakejo, kai mi aĉetos uzitan malmultekostan radon, kai mi metos la pneŭon sur la radon por havi plengrandan aldonan pneŭon en mia aŭto, anstataŭ nur la benjeto. Do tio estas mia plano, kai tio estis mia solvo por mia problemo ĉi-semajne. How much of that did you understand? Hopefully a good amount, and you can kind of see what I meant when I said, oh, should I retire? Well, I'm not talking about quitting YouTube. What I'm talking about there is, should I put new tires on my car? The answer was definitely yes. On my way to work, I noticed something was off. When I got to work, I looked and, yep, I got a flat tire. That's not just punctured, that is sliced. Ooh, and it was on the side wall. You can't fix that. You just need to replace that. But looking around, where can I find a good repair shop where I don't have to miss work to drop it off because of the hours that they're available? Ooh, this is gonna be tough. A neighbor told me that there's a guy who will come to your house and fix your car in your driveway or on your street. So I hired that guy. He came to my street. He put 2 new tires on. Great. And that's because you're supposed to buy tires either 2 at a time or 4 at a time so that they match the tread exactly. But the other tire that wasn't cut or punctured, that one's still perfectly good and it's almost new. So what am I going to do with that? Well, what I used to get home was a little donut. We call that, at least in the US. Do they call it a donut in other countries that speak English? I don't know. But it's like a miniature spare tire that you're not supposed to go too fast on, not supposed to go too far on, but it'll get you home and it doesn't take up as much space. Well, my car has space for a full-size tire. So, all right, I've got a perfectly good tire here. I didn't have an extra rim or wheel, or metal wheel. So my plan, maybe next week, is to go to a junkyard and purchase a cheap, spare, used wheel, and I'll put this perfectly good tire onto that wheel, and then I can totally replace that little donut, which will be nice because there's a good chance I'll be driving to Toronto this summer for the Duolanda Congresso in Toronto. There between USA and Canadian Esperanto Associations, they're working together to have a big conference there. might need to drive there, and it's much better to have a full-size spare that you can drive for a long time at full speed with instead of a little donut. So that is my plan, and there are some rarely used words, at least for me, never before used this until this week, words that I used in those paragraphs, and I want us to talk about them so that you lock them into your memory and you're able to use them on a regular basis if you choose to. Let's look at those. First off, pneŭo is the word for a tire, and that is short for pneŭmatiko. And that's the word I normally use because it's a little easier to say. Pneŭo is a little difficult to pronounce, I find. And pneŭmatiko, that looks like and sounds like pneumatic, right? A pneumatic tire. What does that mean? It means it's a tire that's full of air. My little scooter just has rubber tires. There's no air inside. It's just rubber. So you couldn't call that a pneumatic. You'd just call that a wheel, rado. So rado is a wheel, and pneŭo or pneumatiko is the rubber air-filled tire that goes around that wheel. So when we're talking about cars, that's what we're talking about. And I mentioned that it looked like something had peaked it. Piki, what does that mean? Peaked it, it means punctured or poked it. But then, wait, actually, more accurately, no, it's not pikita, it's tranĉita. It wasn't just a little nail hole that you could patch up. No, this was like a gash. This looked like it had been sliced. Yep, it got really sliced up, maybe against, some pavement. And so, yeah, there's no repairing that. You can only replace it. So, piki is to poke or puncture. Tranĉi is to cut or slice something. So that kind of shows you just how urgent the problem was. The tool that I used to install the spare tire is a jack. Now, what's the word for a car jack? Not carjacking, that would be caperi, like a caper, that would be to rob or steal. To carjack would be if I was stealing a car, that's a carjacking, but a car's jack, a jack for a car, is called a kriko. Kriko is the word for a jack. Another word you could use is rad levilo, which is literally ilo por levi radon. You can say that, you can certainly say that, but it's good to know there's a specific word for the tool, and that's a kriko. And a way to remember that kriko is the word for a automobile's jack is if you don't put a spare tire in your car, you're going to be up a kriko without a pneŭo. Kind of like up a creek without a paddle. You're going to be up a kriko without a pneŭo. Yes, you'll be getting the car up, but you won't have a pneŭo to put on it. So kriko is a jack. Now, if you use Google Translate, and I don't hate on Google Translate, it can be nice to quickly translate whole paragraphs at a time. But if you tried to use that to look up the word for a car jack, you try even saying, I used a jack to fix my tire. It's going to use the word for a jack of spades or a jack of hearts in cards, fanto. It's not going to use the word kriko. So that's where you shouldn't be using Google Translate to learn Esperanto. You should be using an actual English to Esperanto dictionary so you can get at the specific word, because English likes to have one word with lots of different meanings, with a lot of overlap there. So kriko is the word to use. Rado is the word for a wheel. And where am I planning to find a wheel for that other perfectly good pneŭo? I'm planning to go to an aŭtovrakejo. What does that mean? You could probably break that down. It's a place, something to do with cars, but what's that vrako part? Vrako means a wreck. A ruin of a boat or a ship or a car would be a vrako. It sort of looks like a wreck. We don't have a standard W in Esperanto. We don't use that specific letter. We have approximates. What we often do is when there's a W, we'll change it to a V. So George Washington becomes Washingtono. The W becomes a V. So with the word wreck, it becomes a VR instead of a WR. So vrako is a wreck, and a place with lots of wrecks in it, like a shipyard of ruined ships, would be a different word. But if we're specifically talking about automobile wrecks, a junkyard, then we'd say aŭtovrakejo, and that's where you're going to find used parts for not too much money, and that's where hopefully I'll find a decent wheel to put that perfectly good tire onto to upgrade my situation there. So those are a few auto words that you should add to your vocabulary. Next time you're going on an Esperanto road trip and using Pasporta Servo to meet Esperantists along the way, you'll be able to communicate more specifically about what hijinks and difficulties you got into or had to overcome from point A to point B. Check the video description below for information about that upcoming Toronto event. I'm excited about going to that and meeting some new friends as well as seeing some old ones there. And I want to thank you guys for checking out this video and helping yourself to get better at speaking about topics that are not everyday topics, but when you want to talk about it, it's sure helpful to have the right words, right? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Patrons, thank you so much for your support in making these videos and for helping people explore Esperanto.